Happy Friday, Dub Nation. This is the final show where we're actually matching up with the days and making this a daily podcast. Starting next week, yes, we will have a show on Monday. I'm actually going to do a crossover with the Locked On Lakers folks. They courteously invited me on. I don't know why, given the amount of slander I direct their way, but they did add former Warrior Juan Toscano Anderson, and we should still have a fun time. But just a heads up that at least for the month of August, we will not be producing daily content. Expect 2 to 3 shows a week. And then at some point in September, we're going to start ramping things up again as training camp approaches. For today's show, Connor Letourneau, my close friend, someone I consider dear to my heart, a tremendous reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle covering the Golden State Warriors and then some. He joins me on today's Locked On Warriors. But because he was driving, we had to conduct the interview through Zoom. So visually, probably not the greatest show as if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to it on a podcast, Connor's on a phone, should still sound fine. I just finished recording it, and I do want to let you know we covered some great Warriors content. We're talking about Ryan Rollins and the draft picks. We're talking about the financial future of the Warriors. We're talking about what's likely the final roster the Warriors will have for next season. It's a lot of great Warriors content. Coming up next, this is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You can follow Connor Letourneau, enterprise reporter, among many titles he has at the San Francisco Chronicle, at CON_CHRON, Con_Cron on Twitter. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Twitter, at DogSurfRocho. Connor is on the phone today because he's driving out to Stockton for what we talked about before we started recording was this new exciting feature piece. Can you talk about it right now?
Yeah, I'm working on I don't want to get too much into it, but I'm working on a bigger piece that gets at like youth basketball rankings and kind of some of the other aspects that go into ranking kids really young and having youth AAU tournaments all over the country. You know, as anyone who follows my work knows that, yes, I do a lot of Warriors, but I also do a lot of enterprise on a wide range of Bay Area sports topics. So now that we're kind of in the lull of the NBA calendar, trying to use this time to pursue some bigger stuff, stuff I'm kind of passionate about. So it should be fun.
Nice, dude. Let's talk about the Warriors, man. You wrote a brief story. It was just a news brief for the San Francisco Chronicle yesterday, announcing that Ryan Rollins signed a guaranteed 3-year deal. The third year supposedly is more lucrative than the first two. Could you elaborate on what's it seemed? I guess I've never seen like a story written about a second round pick's contract like that. Was there anything unique to it? And then you also added in there something that was interesting. You said he is the 13th man on the roster. I assume Quinndary Weatherspoon is the 12th man. Am I accurate on that?
Quinndary Weatherspoon's on a two-way deal. So when we're talking about 13th man, 14th man, we're talking about the 15-man roster, which is all guaranteed contracts. Okay. So two-way contracts are kind of a different thing. You know, you have the 15-man roster, then you have two guys on two-way deals. So there's actually 17 people on the roster, but the 15-man roster is a different thing. And then as far as Ryan Rollins, speaking of bigger pieces, I actually evening with him in Vegas toward the end of Summer League, and I have a bigger profile on him dropping this weekend. So be on the lookout for that. It'll be, definitely the most in-depth thing that's been done on Ryan Rollins. I was just really intrigued because it's rare that you see a second-round pick be this valued by an organization.
Yes.
I did some research, and that $2 million the Warriors spent to move up to the 41st pick in draft Ryan Rollins is the most money ever spent to move up to a position in the draft that late in the draft. And it's really interesting when you think about it because obviously we all know the Warriors have been incredibly cost conscious lately. Their entire free agency has been defined by trying to save money. So for them to spend $2 million to go and get a middle second rounder, it's fascinating to me. I mean, it speaks to how much they value this guy, but also it's like, why do they value this guy so much when 29 other teams passed on him? And they even passed on him at 28.
Yes.
They could have had him at 28. So, you know, that's a lot of what my profile gets into. Basically, they feel like he's a diamond in the rough. They feel like he's a guy who can, you know, be a back in rotation player as soon as this season. They think he is a really highly developed, skilled offensive player who can be somewhat of a backup point guard at the next level. So, you know, we'll see what happens. But just the entire approach, I think, is really interesting. But part of the philosophy, too, is that even though they spent money to go and draft him, they're actually spending less money to have him on the 15-man roster than they would if they just went and signed some veteran minimum guy, because rookie minimums are obviously the lowest amount of minimums, right? So they're actually kind of saving some money this year when you're talking about the payroll of the roster. So it's kind of an interesting kind of underrated, overlooked kind of salary cap maneuver on the Warriors' part.
What was so special about the contract? I kept reading that the third year had like more guaranteed money. Is there anything unique about his contract versus a typical second round pick?
Well, it's guaranteed. You know, like the second round picks, you don't have guaranteed deals usually. I can only think of a couple guys in recent memory from the Warriors who've been second round picks who've immediately gotten guaranteed deals. Obviously, Eric Pascal got one. I think Patrick McCaw got one. I might be mistaken, but I think he got one right away. So usually if the Warriors are going to pay to get into the second round and draft a guy, they feel confident enough in him to give him a guaranteed deal. But a lot of these guys drafted in those 40s, you know, never even make an NBA roster. You know, they never get a guaranteed deal. They're basically just kind of training camp invitees. So for him to get a multi-year guaranteed deal, value of him, you know, because a lot of these guys, like, he could show up on day one and just not be an NBA player. Like, right. A lot of those guys taking that late just aren't NBA players, but they feel very confident that he's definitely an NBA player. So I think that's the most interesting thing about the contract aspect of it.
No, you're right, man. I had a Raphael Barlow on the show a few weeks back, who's his entire business is covering the draft, covering, you know, high school players, college players, and he was raving about Ryan Rollins. More specifically, I think he played at Toledo for 2 years, and he said his wingspan is really long. He's a stout defender. I didn't really hear much about his offense. In your opinion, from what you've researched, you know, you said you have this profile piece coming out. So I guess maybe give us a tease of what's to come. What's so special about Ryan Rollins, in your opinion? Like, what makes him someone that the Warriors are willing to spend $2 million on to trade up for?
He's kind of like the stereotypic guy the Warriors like. I mean, he has a 6'10" wingspan. He's 6'2" with a 6'10" wingspan. Has a really good feel for the game, really high basketball IQ. He's really smooth offensively. Like, if you watch his film, one thing that jumps out to me is just he has a really good understanding of pacing. Like, he's got this kind of unique kind of flow to his game that's a little bit advanced for someone his age. He just turned 20 years old on July 3rd. He was drafted at 19 years old. And, you know, yes, he comes from a mid-major program in Toledo, but they won. You know, they won the regular season conference championship 2 years in a row. He was a focal point of that offense last year, put up really good numbers against, you know, some high-level teams like Michigan State and things like that. And so, you know, the Warriors love him. Like, I'm sure you heard the story about his pre-draft workout. He was working out, and Steve Kerr was in there just during the NBA Finals, just getting in on the elliptical, like half paying attention. And he's like, turns to Mike Dunleavy Jr., the assistant GM, and he's like, who is that guy? That guy is like head and shoulders better than everyone else. And it was Ryan Rollins. You know, and everyone, you know, who knew him at Toledo, followed him closely, was like, yeah, we knew as quickly as humanly possible, once he was in front of NBA scouts and in a pre-draft workout setting, that he would impress and move up the leaderboard, because he was, like a lot of people had him as a second-round pick coming out of Toledo, and he just finished his sophomore year, so he easily could have gone back, but he decided to go because he felt that confident in his ability to impress in workouts.
I'm guessing you're exciting Dub Nation about the idea of Ryan Rollins becoming that 13th man on the roster. When we come back, we're going to talk a little more about him and the roster in general, because you mentioned that Ryan is the 13th man on the roster, but that does beg the question, who's the 12th and what those other two spots are going to be. First, let's talk about BetOnline, our longtime sponsor, more specifically betonline.net. They're the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, the NFL's around the corner, and NBA futures, NHL futures, combat sports, esports, even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They've got you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline is where the game starts. You can follow Connor Letourneau on Twitter at @con_Chron, CON_CHRON, covering the Warriors and then some. A lot of other stuff going on for you at the San Francisco Chronicle. So I guess when you said that Rollins is the 13th man, who's the 12th? I mean, because are you referring to Patrick Baldwin Jr., even though he hasn't signed yet? And what do you see in regards to those other two spots?
Yeah, I mean, Patrick Baldwin Jr. is going to sign a guaranteed contract, so you can pencil him into that, 13 number. Obviously, JaMychal, if you're going to go based off of when guys sign, I guess you would say that JaMychal Green could be the 12th guy. Yeah, they have 13 guys. I know some people have said they have 14, but Mac McClung is not on a guaranteed deal. His contract is completely non-guaranteed. So I'm only counting guys who will definitely be on the roster next season. There's several training camp invitees, including Mac McClung, Travion Williams, the former lacrosse player out of Loyola, Maryland, who played at Northwestern, who's going to be a training camp invitee. So there's those guys, but we're only talking about guys on guaranteed deals. So there's 13 there. As we all know at this point, it's looking like they're only going to have 14 going into the season because they want to save that money. So they're going to leave that 15th spot probably vacant. And so that 14th spot could very well go to Andre Iguodala if he decides to come back. We still have no resolution there. If he does not come back, if he retires, that 14th spot will probably go to like a Mac McClung or maybe a Travion Williams. I think Mac McClung probably has the inside track for that. There's also a chance that they could move Quindary Weatherspoon into that 14th spot and put someone like Mac McClung on a two-way. Those two-way contracts are really fluid. So the Warriors wouldn't be out anything just converting that two-way deal for Quindary into a standard guaranteed deal.
What do you think was the hesitation for not giving Quindary the guaranteed deal? And you're right, the two-way is very fluid. The biggest negative with the two-way is that if you're on a two-way contract, I don't know what the date is, but once you pass a certain date, I think it's in January, and you're on a two-way deal, you can't play in the playoffs. And so what do you think is the hesitation for not giving Quindary the guaranteed deal? And do you think that's going to happen eventually? What are your thoughts on that?
I honestly think it was just a salary cap maneuver on the Warriors' part. I don't think it's an indictment at all against Quindary. I think they really like him. They really like what he did last season. It's unfortunate for Quindary because the way two-way contracts are set up right now, there's just really not a lot of incentive for an NBA team to put someone like him on a guaranteed deal when they could easily just have him on the two-way. They gave him the two-way qualifying offer, and then, he didn't sign it for weeks because he was vetting his market, seeing if he could get a standard minimum somewhere. He didn't get that standard minimum anywhere. If he had, I think the Warriors would have matched it. He probably would have been on a minimum deal with the Warriors, but he didn't get that offer anywhere, so he basically had to go back to the Warriors on a two-way, which allows the Warriors to save a little bit of money. And as we've been talking about, they're counting every penny right now. So if they can, they will save that money. And the thing about someone like Quindary is like, yeah, he can eat up some regular season minutes for you, but I think he'll get on the floor this season. I think he'll get on the floor even more than he did last season, but he's obviously not going to be a guy who's going to be in the playoff rotation. He's not going to be a guy who you need in the playoffs. So, there's really no incentive to have someone like that on the guaranteed roster. You know what I mean? I mean, on the two-way, you can play an unlimited amount of regular season games, which is not used to be the case. I think it was like 52 games was your limit. Now you can play as many as you want. So, it's an unfortunate thing for Quindary because I talked to him at Summer League and he was frustrated. This is before he agreed to go back on the two-way. He's like, dude, I feel like I've proven myself. Like I'm trying to get on a standard deal and I feel like I'm better than a lot of these other guys on 15-man rosters throughout the NBA, and I'm tired of being on the two-way. He has now made NBA history as the first player in NBA history to be on a two-way contract for 4 straight years, which stinks for him. I mean, no one wants that on their bio,
Yeah. And I think he's right. I think Quindary is better than a lot of players on 15-man rosters. And he keeps in reading these attributions from him, he keeps trying to say that he wants to kind of fill that Gary Payton II role, especially as a defensive stalwart. And I could see it. I mean, the potential is there. That's the whole reason why I bring up the playoff thing, is because maybe he could have a role in the playoffs at some point, depending on how well he plays this year. Dude, why, if the Warriors are trying to save money, why do you think they're going to give Patrick Baldwin Jr. an NBA contract when they could just stash him away in Santa Cruz for a year and hold his rights with a G League contract? Like, you're saying there's no chance of that, even though he doesn't seem NBA ready?
That's not what I've been hearing. I mean, I've been hearing he's going to get a guaranteed.
Gotcha.
I know. I guess I think that's a relatively new thing, right? Where first-round picks don't have to be guaranteed for a long time.
It just hasn't been used in a while. But the precedent goes back to I think 2014. You're right. Teams don't do it that much, but they have the right to. And I don't know if they don't do it because
it's kind of like, to be honest, it's just kind of like a weird precedent to set. I mean, if you're gonna take a guy in the first round, hopefully you believe in him enough to give him a guaranteed deal. But this is a weird situation in that, like, talking to people in the Warriors organization, you almost, if you didn't know any better, if you didn't know where they were taken, but just based off how people talk, you would think that Ryan Rollins was the first round pick.
Yes.
And that Patrick Baldwin was the second round pick.
Yes.
The people in the organization seem a lot higher on Ryan Rollins. I feel like Patrick Baldwin was more of just a gamble. It's like a high upside play, and I understand it, but you're right. He's probably not going to play much, if at all, for the Warriors this season. He'll probably be with Santa Cruz, but I still expect him to have a 15-man roster spot. And the reality is he probably will play some in the regular season just because the regular season is long. I think that they're going to be, resting their key older guys a lot.
Yeah.
There's going to be some minutes. There's going to be those nights, maybe in San Antonio or like Indiana or like, some of those bad teams where they just don't really try. They sit the big guys and they let, the Patrick Baldwins of the world get some run. So yeah, I think that's technically a possibility, but I think he's going to get a guaranteed deal.
Yeah. And I think
they want him to feel believed in.
Exactly. I that's the line I was going down as well. Logically, is that if you did that with him, where you gave him just the G League contract, like he would not be happy, and I guess you don't want unhappy campers on your roster. But at the same time, it's like if they're trying to save money,
you'd be doing him a disservice because who's to say that someone wouldn't have taken him at 29 or 30 who would have given him a guaranteed deal. So he's out money because you took him earlier. Like, It's a little unfair to him. It's just not, it's not like a good way to start a relationship with a player who you claim to believe in and you claim to, think has a bright future.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I haven't had a chance to talk to you, and I can't wait until you're back in your routine. It's summer. You're going on trips. You're getting engaged. You're just having the time of your life right now, and good for you, brother. You deserve it. I have not had a chance to talk to you about JaMychal Green. What are your thoughts on him, man? I am elated. Your thoughts?
I think it was a great pickup. I think that if you look at who was available in the open market, there's not a better guy you could have gotten on a minimum who fills the need. They needed a stretch four. They needed kind of like a pick and pop big to kind of round out that rotation. And he is that. He's proven to be that. He's done it at a high level, I think, for a long time. Yes, he had a little bit of a down year last year, but that was kind of a unique situation with Denver. There were a lot of different factors that I think contributed to his poor shooting numbers. Mm-hmm. But he was still helpful, even though his threes weren't going down at the rate you want him to. He's pretty good defensively. He has a good feel for the game. I don't think he was any sort of liability for Denver. I mean, there's a reason why he still played significant minutes in the playoffs for them.
Agreed.
And so I thought it was a great pickup. I thought it was a little bit of next level thinking, once again, on Bob Myers' part to vet the market and see that someone like that could be available and to, play the long game and be patient and wait for him to get the buyout with OKC. Like, there were several layers to that I think people kind of, take that for granted with Bob Myers. I mean, if you look at their free agency signings, the same thing could be said for Dante DiVincenzo. There were several layers to that. They had to know that Sacramento was not going to extend him a qualifying offer. They had to pounce right away. They had to do a lot of things to get into position to sign someone like that. To the deal they did. And so if you look at what they've done in free agency, and like I said earlier, I think they're done. Outside of maybe bringing back Andre, I think they're done. And so I know a lot of people are upset, understandably, that they didn't re-sign GP2, they didn't re-sign Otto Porter Jr. and those guys. But if you look at it, I mean, I saw a tweet, I think, from Bobby Marks from ESPN the other day, and the difference between salary and luxury tax that they're saving between GP2 and OPJ versus Dante DiVincenzo and JaMychal Green is like well over $50 million. Mm-hmm. And yes, GP2 and OPJ are better players than Dante DiVincenzo and JaMychal Green, but are they $50 million better? Like
56,
I think when you factor in the financial aspect of this, you got to say that it was pretty shrewd on the Warriors' part, and I thought smart. And I think both of those guys are going to be very helpful rotation players for the Warriors. And I thought that given the deals that they were signed to, and that's what you got to judge this off of is the contracts that they're on. Yep. They're absolute bargains. I felt the same way about OPJ last year when he was signed on a minimum. I feel the same way about JaMychal Green and Dante.
Oh, I love the JaMychal Green signing, and again, he could even play small ball 5. That's he brings a lot of versatility. I'll leave you with this.
He's like he's a better version of Belly. Is basically how I look at it.
Yeah, and then the way I look at it, what I keep saying is the Warriors basically traded Gary Payton II, Otto Porter Jr., and Bielitsa, but what they got in return is Dante DiVincenzo, JaMychal Green, and then now you got James Wiseman, who they didn't see for a minute last year. So when you really look at that swap, it's almost even. I mean, it depends on how they perform this year, but it might actually be a win. I'm not bummed about it, man. I mean, the moment the JaMychal Green signing happened, I felt relieved, dude. My offseason was back to comfort and relaxation. But until then, man, I was bummed, dude. I did not know what the Warriors are planning there. What is your thought? I'll leave you with this, because I had our boy Keith Smith was on this show the other day. He provided tremendous insight and information about the Warriors' salary cap situation. There's a lot of hope. Keith is actually very confident that at some point during the middle of the season, it will be announced, not formally, but at least the knowledge will be out there that the CBA, part of the revision, will include a lack of penalties, more specifically luxury tax penalties for teams' draft picks. which the Warriors are full of. The only player really making big money that is not a draft pick is Wiggins. So when Draymond Green is coming out saying, I want a max deal, it might be under the premise that the Warriors next year might actually see their tax hit just completely deflate. And if that's the case, I can understand Draymond asking for that. If it doesn't happen, then he's asking for a lot. What are your thoughts on the Draymond Green max extension demand that he's reportedly making?
First of all, shout out to Keith Smith.
Yes.
Anyone who's read my coverage has seen his name a lot. He's like my go-to salary cap guy. I'm not a salary cap expert. And obviously the salary cap is incredibly important to the Warriors right now. So he's been kind of the guy I've been leaning on. So I thought it was cool that you had him on. I listened to that episode. Nice. I thought it was super informative.
Thanks to you, Connor. Thanks to you, man.
Yeah, he's amazing. Definitely go listen to that, listeners, if you haven't already. But I think that, first of all, this entire situation with 2023-24, the payroll for 2023-24, and all the extensions and contract situations that go into that, to me, is the most important issue facing the Warriors, period. End of story. It is going to be the storyline all season. It is going to be hanging over the Warriors every single day. It's going to be huge because even if the Warriors win the title next year, you're doing that under the premise knowing you got to make a really important decision that summer if you haven't already. And I actually just filed, before I got in the car to drive to beautiful Stockton, California, I filed a story that basically, it was a column, and I looked at this entire situation, and I understand why there's a lot of chatter right now about Draymond. There was obviously that report the other day from The Athletic that said that he wants a max deal. And I completely understand that. That obviously has implications for the year that really matters, which is 2023-24. But ultimately, I think that kind of overlooks the point a little bit. And the point is that what really matters right now is that the Warriors have to decide between Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins. Whatever happens with Draymond is going to happen with Draymond. Draymond's going to be on the team. Okay, they're going to figure it out. They're going to figure something out. Draymond will be on the team. Okay, whether that's at a max deal, I don't know. He's going to be on the team for the foreseeable future. That's not the case with potentially Jordan Poole or Andrew Wiggins. Like, if you look at the situation right now, they can't keep both of them. That's just the practical reality. Joe Lacob has gone on record multiple times and intimated as much that they can't keep both of them. And so what I wrote today, and it should be online by now, is I think that it's becoming clear that Jordan Poole is probably going to be the odd man out. And it's definitely a change of course because, I remember coming on this podcast a few months ago and we all thought, oh, it's probably going to be Andrew Wiggins is going to be the odd man out, right?
Yes.
But before Andrew Wiggins came and was unquestionably the Warriors' second best player in the playoffs for a championship team and was incredibly important on both sides of the ball, rebounded the CRAP out of the ball, and proved that he is a core piece of a dynastic team. And so when you factor that in, I think that changed the calculus. And, talking to people in the organization, I know that they're serious about at least having conversations with Andrew Wiggins about a contract extension. I'm not sure that it'll happen this summer. I know that there will be conversations with Poole this summer as well, but I get the vibe that they're going to kick the can down the road and just see how next season develops, which is, I think, the prudent thing to do. You want to make these decisions when you have the most information at your disposal. Like, a lot could happen next season that changes the Warriors' plans. Maybe Poole gets injured and that hurts his market value, and the Warriors can re-sign him at a more affordable rate. There's just a lot of things that could happen. But I think based off of the information that we have right now, I think if they had to make a decision today, I think that they would pick Wiggins. And ultimately, it comes down to one very simple thing, and it is the fact that two-way wings, high-level two-way wings, are much harder to find than high-level scoring shooting guards. And I think that Jordan Poole, as great as he is, and I really I have a lot of respect for him, how much he's improved, proving us all wrong. I was one of those people who was not high on him early in his career.
Same.
Tons of props to him. But at the end of the day, he's far more replaceable than Andrew Wiggins. You can go out and replace his offensive production. And the truth is, if you look at last season, he was the only guy in the top 8 of that rotation who was a defensive liability. And Andrew Wiggins is, a two-way player in the true every sense of the word. He was guarding the best player on the opposing team night in and night out. His defense on Luka Doncic and Jason Tatum was one of the biggest reasons that this side of Steph and Curry why the Warriors won the title.
Yep.
And so I think that is ultimately why the balance is going to tip in Wiggins' favor. Also, another factor here is the age. Okay, Wiggins is 27 years old. He's kind of that perfect bridge age-wise between the older generation of Steph, Draymond, Clay, and the younger generation of like Kuminga, Wiseman, Moody. He's at an age where he'll still be in his prime once Steph and those guys decline or retire. He'll be kind of that older statesman guy in his early 30s. And I think that's really valuable when you're looking at this from a macro lens. Mm-hmm. Whereas, I hate to say it, but Poole's almost too young. Poole's only 23, and he's definitely more in that generation of the younger generation. I think it would behoove the Warriors to have kind of that bridge player, and I think they'd be much more likely to not have a huge drop-off when Steph Curry leaves if they kept Wiggins over Poole.
But is all this a moot point if they revise the CBA to stop penalizing teams for paying their draft picks?
I don't know a lot about the nuances of that. I haven't seen a lot of that. I listened to the majority of your podcast, Keith, the other day. Maybe I missed that part, but I don't know a ton about that. So it depends on what the changes would be. So I can't really speak to that. I'm only going off the information we have right now and the rules in place now, and that's really all you can do right now.
Yeah. And because the way Keith is confident that because after this year they're going to have to revise this thing and there probably won't be a lockout, but one of the sticking points, and it might not be a sticking point, maybe both sides come to a quick agreement, is that while the premise, the idea of the luxury tax is to prevent the bigger market teams from outspending smaller market teams, you're penalizing small market teams as well. The Oklahoma City Thunder are a perfect example of that because they're basing their entire roster on draft picks. And at a certain point, they're going to have a situation like the Warriors have where you have 4 or 5 guys who you drafted yourself. And now you're giving them max deals, close to max deals. And it just doesn't seem fair to be penalized for your draft picks. And Keith seems very confident that they're going to revise this thing to take out the penalties so that when the Warriors pay Stephen Curry $50 million a year, they're not really paying $150 million a year with all the penalties attached to that. And if that happens, I think the Warriors are stoked. I think then you can start entertaining the idea of keeping both Wiggins and Jordan Poole. But you're right. Under the current rules, I'm with you. And honestly, man, that's the only reason why I thought the Kevin Durant thing was a real possibility, because I thought the Warriors were looking at this as either we lose Wiggins or Poole, or we could lose both, but we get Kevin Durant back in return. Who knows if that's still realistic? BetOnline, our longtime sponsor, actually lists the Warriors, gives the Warriors the second highest odds to acquire Kevin Durant. Do you think that's, I guess we'll end on that note, do you think that's dead in the water now? Any idea of Durant coming to the Warriors?
I always thought it was dead in the water. So, I mean, I never thought that was like a viable thing. So, yeah.
There you go. All right. Good stuff. That ends that. And again, Connor, you always produce tremendous content. I've actually been reading you in print just because we have at my mom and now former stepdad's house, so we have a subscription to the San Francisco Chronicle a year. My stepdad was an ardent reader of the newspaper, and I saw some of your pieces there just today, man. It was good to actually hold the newspaper. It's been a while. I forgot how I missed those days, man, where you actually just sit down, have a cup of coffee, eat your breakfast, and you just have all this incredible content in front of you that exercises your brain, informs you with valid information. But again, you can also read all of Connor's content online because you could subscribe that way.
Yeah.
So,
in the Chronicle, one of the things I like about the Chronicle is like I feel like we're one of the few newspapers left that still cares about its print edition.
Yeah.
Like we put effort into it. My former employer, they had a print edition, but like they just did not care at all about it. They phoned it in. Whereas we actually really care about the layout. We have a really good designer who puts in real hours to make it look its best every single day. I think the sporting green, the whole idea behind it, I think is cool. So yeah, shout out to anyone who still reads the print edition.
That's awesome.
Because we still care about it. So
me too, man. I love it so much, dude. That's good stuff. And keep up the great work, brother. Let's definitely do this again soon. And all the best, man. Have fun in paradise, in the #1 tourist destination in California, Stockton, California. Have fun, brother.
Hey, I'm just driving down the road here in Stockton, daydreaming about Sons of Anarchy, which was set in this area.
Dude. Oh, one of my all-time favorite shows. You're right. In the fictional town of Charming, located between Stockton and Modesto.
They talked a lot about Stockton in that show because it was supposed to be like a fictional town that was right next door to Stockton.
Yeah, Charming. Yes, exactly. The fictional town of Charming, California. Oh man, if you folks have never seen Sons of Anarchy, there's a lot of violence, but damn, is that a good show, man. I was near tears at the end. I'll just leave it at that. Good reference, dude. Good work there. All right, Connor, we'll talk soon, brother. Thank you.
All right, thank you.